Hey there, it's Jacques from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to day 3 of official Shadows Over Innistrad spoilers. So this is the third day of official spoilers, and our third Planeswalker that's been revealed in a row. And it appears we're probably going to have one more, so stay tuned for that. But today we're going to be looking at Jace, Unraveler of Secrets, as well as 6 more other brand new cards that have been revealed. So, having said that, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, definitely a great time to do so. Every day that spoilers come out, we'll have a video to compile them for you, and then a week from Friday we'll start our full set review once the full set has been revealed. So let's look at these new cards that we have for today. Let's start with Epiphany of the Drownyard. This is 1 blue and X for an instant. This is a rare. Reveal the top X+1 cards of your library and separate them into 2 piles. An opponent chooses one of those piles, put that pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. So this card has already been compared to a cross between Stroke of Genius and Fact or Fiction, and that's not entirely the case. If you recall, Fact or Fiction, your opponent makes the piles and you choose, which is a little better than this effect, which is more the Steam Augury effect, which is where you make the piles and your opponent chooses. So having said that, though, this card is still very good, and what I like about it is the X value of this card. You can play this in the late game and just draw a whole bunch of cards, and even if you're getting the worst out of the 2 piles that you make, you're still drawing a whole bunch of cards, and that's why this is still very good. So here's where I like it. Obviously in limited, I think this is going to be great for you, especially if you play this like late game. There's a board stall, it's the end of your opponent's turn, you cast this at instant speed and you just get a whole bunch of new cards. That's kind of awesome. As far as standard goes, I could see this, it wants to be played in a deck that is going to have a lot of mana and is maybe going to be a little slow and grindier, so I'm thinking control deck, obviously. But I think this would be a great card if that control deck does exist in standard. Okay, let's look at Jace, Unraveler of Secrets. 2 blue, 3 generic, Planeswalker Jace, loyalty 5, +1, scry 1, then draw a card. -2, return target creature to its owner's hand. -8, you get an emblem with whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, counter that spell. So the first thing I'll say about this is it's very simplistic in design. It reminds me a little bit of Ob Nixilis. Cost 5, it's basically the same idea with the casting cost, and the abilities are just very straightforward, very narrow. Doesn't necessarily mean they're not good, but they're just very straightforward. Now, I think some people have already looked at this card and feel a little underwhelmed by it. I'll say the casting cost is a tad high and is going to keep this card out of Eternal formats. At 5 mana, there's just better things you could be doing. There's also better Jaces you could be casting for 3 or 4 mana in those formats, so it's probably not going to make any kind of splash there. However, don't underestimate this card. The fact that the +1 is letting you scry and then draw a card is actually kind of awesome, and he comes in with 5 loyalty. As far as protecting himself, the -2 is a little bit of protection. It does help. It's not going to help you through every situation, but at least some of them it may make a difference. And this is the kind of card you're not necessarily putting out trying to ultimate. You're trying to put this out and you're trying to draw and scry maybe 2, if you're lucky, 3 times off it before it dies. And if you can do that and then make your opponent waste resources to get rid of it, then it's done its job and it's probably swung the game in your favor already. So I do think this will see standard play. Again, this is best in a control deck, and that's kind of where it wants to live. So maybe with this card and the previous one we looked at, those pieces of that control deck are coming together. It's also very good, I think, in limited. Obviously, it's still going to be a limited bomb. It's going to draw you some cards, and that's huge. And it can also give you some tempo plays that will be even better in limited. And yeah, it's a cool commander card too, I think. Although there are other Jaces to choose from, sure, but I think it would be a fun card to at least try out some cubes or commander builds as well. Alright, next card comes to us from a Japanese language card that was spoiled, and it's Rise from the Tides. Costs 1 blue, 5 generic. It's a sorcery. For each instant or sorcery card in your graveyard, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. So for me, this card is kind of screaming out commander. Obviously, you want a commander deck with a lot of instants and sorceries, maybe like an Izzet build of some kind, and then later in the game, you just play this and you get a whole bunch of zombies. I think that would be awesome. As far as limited goes, most limited decks are pretty creature heavy. So that's the only drawback to this card if it's in your limited pool. Now, it is an uncommon, so it's not like it's taking the rare slot or anything. And there are times in limited that you do get a deck that is a little heavier with instants and sorceries, and maybe this is a finisher in those very unique situations. So having said that, we haven't seen the blue commons yet. So maybe there are a lot of good instants and sorceries that you could play in limited. We don't know that yet. But this card might see a little bit of fringe limited play. Other than that, I think it's a little too pricey and a little too conditional to be played in other formats. I do like the fact it doesn't exile the cards in your graveyard. It's just checking to see what's in there to make the tokens. I think that's pretty cool. All right, next we have a transform card. We have Breakneck Rider, which transforms into Neckbreaker. So it costs 2 red in a generic, Human Scout Werewolf, 3/3, and at the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, transforms into a 4/3 werewolf. Attacking creatures you control get +1/+0 and have trample. At the beginning of each upkeep, if a player casts 2 or more spells last turn, transform. So this is a pretty good aggressive card. 2 red and 1 for a 3/3. I'm pretty happy with that. A lot of times in limited, you're playing 4 for a 3/3. So you're getting all that plus upside. That's pretty awesome in limited. And you flip it, and now you got a 4/3. And attacking creatures you control get +1/+0 and trample, not other attacking creatures. So this actually attacks in as a 5/3 trampler. That's awesome. So this is going to be phenomenal in limited. You'll be very happy to get this. As far as standard goes, I still think there's going to be a red aggressive deck, and even if that's just a retooling of decks like Atarka Red, or if it's something brand new, I think cards like this are going to see standard play, especially early on in its lifespan. This card just looks like it's an important piece of the puzzle of this red, maybe red-black aggressive build that could potentially be good enough for standard, and we have another card coming up in a few minutes that really supports that as well. Next we have Groundskeeper, and this was spoiled from a Chinese simplified card. However, this is actually a reprint. So this costs 1 green. It's a 1/1 human druid. Pay a green and a generic, return target basic land card from your graveyard to your hand. Now this was originally printed way back in Mercadian Masks. It was then reprinted in 9th edition, so it's already a modern card. But this could be interesting in this limited environment just because you're dumping a lot of cards in your graveyard. And it seems like there's a lot of milling going on, a lot of discarding, so you may have to discard a land at some point if you don't have a Madness card to discard, and this is a way to get that back. So there's going to be some limited builds that are going to want one of these in the deck, and I think it could get you a little bit of value in Drafter Sealed. Next is Olivia, Mobilized for War. 1 red, 1 black, 1 generic. This is a legendary vampire knight, 3/3 with flying, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may discard a card. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. It gains haste until end of turn, and it becomes a vampire in addition to its other types. Here's the other card I mentioned. This is a huge aggressive card. Now this is a mythic, and it feels mythic just because it's so cheaply costed and is doing so much. So even a 3/3 flyer for 3 is actually pretty awesome. And then you look at the upside to this, and this is an amazing card. So first off, yeah, unlimited, obviously it's a limited bomb. This is going to really encourage you to play a red-black aggro build in your limited pool if it's there when you open this, right? As far as standard goes, I think again the deck is going to exist in some way, shape, or form. Just that aggressive red/black deck is going to be a thing, and this is going to be a big part of it. Also too, keep in mind this plays very well with Calatus, making your other creatures into vampires, and it plays very well with Delirium as well as Madness. Our last card of the day is Sigarda, Heron's Grace. 1 white, 1 green, 3 generic. It's a legendary angel, 4/5 with flying. You and humans you control have hexproof. Pay 2, exile a card from your graveyard. Put a 1/1 white human soldier creature token onto the battlefield. So if you compare this to the previous Sigarda, in some ways it may feel a little underwhelming at first just because the previous one had hexproof, was very difficult to get rid of. This time she gives the hexproof to you, the player, and to humans, which is actually really cool from a flavor point of view. I think that's awesome. So it seems like it's a little easier to deal with. However, keep this in mind. In standard right now, it is very, very, very difficult to get rid of a 4/5 flyer. Most of the regular removal that you see can deal with a 4 or 5 flyer. Now, we haven't seen what's coming yet completely from Shadows Over Innistrad, but as of right now, this is a very hard card to deal with in standard and could just simply be a beater. So in that regard, I think it will see some standard play. Maybe there will be a white weenie deck out there. There seems to be pieces. I mean, this works very good with Ordric. So who knows? Maybe that will become a thing in Standard, but even if it doesn't, this could just plain be a beater in a deck that can cast it. As far as Limited goes, obviously, yeah, this is Mythic, and it's going to feel Mythic, especially in a limited game. 4/5 flyer for 5, you'll be very happy with that. Plus, in the late game, you can just start making 1/1 hexproof soldiers. Yeah, why not? This is going to be really cool there. Also, it's legendary, much like the previous card we looked at. Could both be very interesting commanders in the future. So as far as the clause about you have hexproof, there's probably better ways in like the Eternal formats and probably even Modern to give yourself hexproof if you need to out of the sideboard, but I think it's still an interesting concept, and it might come into play in Standard. I think we just need to see more cards from Shadows Over Innistrad. So having said that, those are the cards for today, and actually some pretty exciting ones. A really good group today of cards, and usually you get some strong cards at the beginning of the spoiler season. This is no exception. So hey, as always, thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day.
Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video, like all my videos, was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Even a donation of $1 helps me to keep growing this community and creating better quality videos for all of you. Check out our Patreon page for exclusive giveaways and future goals for the channel. If you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, product openings, or finance videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a good day.